Well, hello, folks. Thank you for joining the Missouri Department of Conservation for our Wild Webcast on the cicada apocalypse. So thank you for joining us. I am your host, Joe Jarek, and we will have our special expert, Erin Shank, coming on here in a second. I want to make sure, can you see the screen, folks? And can you hear me? So give us an indication in the chat box. Okay, we're getting thumbs up. So we will go. Today we're talking about a brood awakening, the fascinating life of periodical cicadas. And again, we have our urban wildlife biologist with the Missouri Department of Conservation, Erin Shank, who's with us today. Thanks, Erin, for joining us.
Thank you, Joe. You know I love to talk about cicadas.
This is truly a wild webcast on some really wild wildlife. These things are amazing. So let's kind of jump into it. And again, I'm Joe Jarek, your host, and you see me there with it's a sedated bear cub during one of our bear trappings. And then Erin is pictured there. Erin, is that one of your kids?
That is one of my kids.
One of your kiddos with that's during
the human one, not the goose one.
Right, but that's also during a Canada goose banding that
Yes,
staff does. Often we invite the public, so your child got to have some fun with that.
Yep.
Folks, again, thanks for joining us, Erin. And thanks for joining us, folks. Use the chat box on the right side of your screen to share questions with us, and we'll answer as many as we can during the hour we have ahead. So let's jump into the good stuff.
All right.
So we're going to cover what's is a cicada anyway, and why are there so many this year? And they have one of the most fascinating lifestyles of the insect world. Plus, they have a huge impact on our ecosystem, on pets, people, other things. And most of all, they're only here briefly, so let's enjoy them while they last. Tell us more, Erin. What is a cicada?
Sure. Yeah, cicadas are true bugs. So they're in the order of insects called Hemiptera. This includes things like aphids and leafhoppers, shield bugs. So Hemiptera are or true bugs are insects that have two pairs of wings, and the front, or like the outer pair of wings, is typically divided into a leathery part and a more membrane part. And they hold their wings back, as you can see in that picture.
Okay.
They are not locusts, which oftentimes they're referred to as locusts just because of their sheer numbers.
Right.
They're actually grasshoppers.
Okay, so these are not locusts or grasshoppers. They're true bugs.
Yep, and there's a difference between, of course, our periodical cicadas, which is what we're seeing right now, versus our annual cicadas. So periodical cicadas are, like you've already said, some of the most unusual insects and truly some of the most unusual wildlife anywhere in the world. Something really interesting that I'm realizing a lot of people don't know is that periodical cicadas only exist in our part of North America. So really in the eastern part of the United States is the only place in the world you find periodical cicadas. Now, annual cicadas, there's thousands of species worldwide. Those are cicadas that come out on a yearly basis. And then we have those in Missouri as well. You can see they're much larger, a little bit more drab looking, if you will, whereas the periodical cicadas are kind of fancy with their red eyes and orange striping.
Very stunning to look at.
We've got about 7 species of annual cicadas in Missouri, which we see just about every year. They all look pretty much the same, but periodical cicadas, there's only 4 species.
Okay, good to know. So the reason we have so many this year is that's why they're called periodical, because they emerge in mass at certain times of year. So we're looking at a complicated map here with a lot of information. So would you just kind of briefly simply walk us through this?
I will. So we refer to cicadas in terms of broods. So a brood is really more of a bookkeeping concept. It's not really a biological concept, but it helps us keep track of when certain emergences, these large emergences, are going to happen. So right now, we are experiencing brood 19 in Missouri, and it is a 13-year cicada brood. So it does contain all 4 species of the 13-year cicadas. And you may have heard in the news about a northern brood. We're really not going to see much of that in Missouri, but northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, some parts of Iowa are also going to see a 17-year brood emerging this year. So that's unusual to have a 13 and 17-year matchup that only happens every, it's a little under 300 years that those two would match up.
Wow. Hey, Erin, that leads to one of our first questions. We've been actually getting calls from individuals in the media outlets out of Kansas City. So as we know, you're based out of St. Louis. There's a lot of periodical cicadas happening there. We're based out of Jeff City in central Missouri. We're seeing a lot. Southern Missouri is seeing a lot. But Kansas City really isn't seeing much, if anything. Neither is kind of Northwest Missouri. Can you explain that?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brood 19, the Kansas City region is really on the far western stretches of the range. And you can kind of see in the map here, the orange dot, that is this brood 19. It's a significant portion of the Midwest and the southern states that does experience that. But you see, if you look up where Kansas City, St. Joe are, it really doesn't extend that far. So they might see some, but they would be very few.
So that's kind of a pocket amidst all of this that's really not seeing this. Okay, well, that explains it.
Yeah, they did see, you can see there, they did see that 17-year brood emerge in 2015, and that's that blue dot on the map in that western.
Oh, okay. The color dots are very helpful. And folks, we understand this, the numbers get a little confusing because it's brood 13, 17, they're 19-year.
And they're in Roman numerals.
Right, so
somewhat arbitrary. This Roman numeral system started in the late 1800s to try to keep track of the different broods, and they were kind of just arbitrarily assigned then as they came out. So there are, it says it right here, there's 15 total broods anywhere in the world. They all exist right here where you're looking on your map. 12 of those are 17-year broods, cycle broods, and those tend to be more northern, and then 3 of those are 13-year broods, and those tend to be more southern.
Well, that is fascinating. And again, folks, how cool that this is a global phenomena that we only experience in the eastern part of the United States. So that is really cool. And as we look at these broods, and here's some more pictures of a bunch of different cicadas.
Yeah, so like I said, this is called the Great Southern Brood, brood 19, and called the Great Southern Brood because it is the largest brood of cicadas anywhere in the world as far as the geographic range. It does contain 4 species. These are 3 of them that I put up here that I am seeing around St. Louis. And so you can see there are 2 of those that are kind of significantly smaller than the third one, and there's some differences between those 2 smaller ones too. One tends to be almost entirely black on the underside of the abdomen, and the other one has some orange bars. And then, of course, the large one is really easy to identify because it has a pretty striking orange abdomen and just by its sheer size as well.
That is amazing. And folks, thank you. We are already getting a ton of questions. So Erin, I'm just going to rattle off a bunch of questions, and I want people to know that we'll probably answer most of these throughout our conversation, but wanted to get it on deck. So Amber wants to know, how do they make that sound? Kai wants to know when, and we'll answer these as we go through. When will cicadas peak in terms of numbers in St. Louis? Can they bite me? Do they kill trees? Is it okay if my dog eats them? Can they harm a hay crop? How do they know when it's time to emerge? How does this year's brood compare to what folks experienced in 1998 or 99 in Mexico, Missouri? Gary wants to know that. One of our listeners, Jill, was quote unquote attacked by cicadas as she was cutting her lawn because they were drawn to her lawnmower and the sound of it, and they were just covering her lawnmower. And then finally, we had a drought back in 2012, and how did that affect this emergence? So these are questions we will answer along the way. But as we continue, impacts of habitat loss on cicadas. Why don't you explain some of that to us?
Yeah, we definitely know that cicadas are susceptible to impacts from habitat loss. So they require eastern deciduous forests. So think of oak, hickory, maple, sycamore. You see that these are two pictures actually from St. Louis County this week. On the left, you see all those holes. Those are emerging or cicadas that have emerged from those holes. And then on the right, of course, you see them all on that sycamore tree. And so they require this kind of habitat with enough tree canopy to live out their 13-year life. It can be patchy, like they will do fine in urban areas where there is enough tree canopy. Typically, they need about 120 acres of patchy forest in order to really continue to exist in reproducible broods. But we definitely see the impact of habitat loss, for example, in agricultural areas. So as land has been cleared for agriculture or new suburban developments where land has been completely cleared, oftentimes you will no longer see cicadas in those areas. Now, if they're surrounded by some other habitat, they can reestablish over the course of a brood or two in those areas. But we know that populations are likely declining because of habitat loss, but it's a really difficult life form to study because you can only really study the population every 13 or 17 years.
For a couple of months, more than a decade at a time. So, so basically, if you don't have enough or a lot of eastern deciduous trees, you probably won't have the periodical cicadas.
Correct. That is correct.
Right. And as we look, I mean, we talk about they emerge every 13 years then, 15 years, 17 years, something.
This great southern brood is a 13-year brood. Okay. So the last time we saw them was 13 years ago. And I like to just kind of remind folks that these cicadas are the same age as your middle schoolers. Right. I mean, that's an incredibly long-lived insect. So the last time we saw them was 2011. Barack Obama was president, campaigning for a second term. You got to mention Taylor Swift fun fact. Right. She was on her second tour. Harry Potter was top at the box office, and our graduating seniors, our high school seniors, the class of 2024, were 5-year-olds getting ready to head to kindergarten. Wow.
So this really is just fascinating. Well, we talked about habitat loss and things. Shelley wants to know, can they harm a hay crop?
No, they only feed on woody vegetation. So your hay crop is safe, as are your flowers and vegetable plants as well.
Right. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but Cameron, will they kill trees? Or do we have that ahead of us?
We can talk about that now. Actually, mature trees are well adapted to withstand the cicadas. Now, very young trees that were planted, say, last year, this year, if you are having an emergence in large numbers, you might put some bird netting over those to protect them. It's likely they'll be okay, but it really depends on how heavily used those particular trees are by the females when they lay eggs, and we will cover that.
We'll go to that into more detail. But again, they have this incredibly long life cycle. Why don't you take us through that?
Yeah, I really like this graphic, so I wanted to show it to everybody. So we're kind of at this point where molting and exoskeletons, you're seeing those everywhere, where they come out of the ground and they shed that last exoskeleton. And typically they climb up on something vertical to do that. It takes them a little while to emerge, and then they'll start their mating calls. And that, of course, is that very loud singing that we hear throughout the day. The hotter and sunnier it gets, the louder that's going to get, and they mate. And then within probably 3 to 5 days, 2 to 4 days, the female will lay her eggs in the bark of a tree limb. Typically, they're laid in twig size, like pencil-sized or diameter twigs. And then those nymphs will hatch in about 5 or 6 weeks. From those eggs, they fall to the ground. They tunnel down about 8 inches or so, where they spend the next 12 years underground and emerge on that 13th year.
Okay, so we're going to leave this up for a minute so folks can kind of absorb that. That explains the shells that we see once those nymphs emerge from the shells, and it's kind of like, almost peanut shells, just littering everywhere. Some questions. So how long will cicadas be here this summer? Claire would like to know.
Likely now. I'm coming from St. Louis, so we started seeing them in about first, second week of May. They'll probably peak in the next, as far as numbers and volume, in the next 2 weeks or so. Like right now, we're kind of heading into the peak of that, and that'll extend for another 2 weeks or so, and then they'll start to die out. It'll seem slowly to us, but it's relatively quick, and I suspect by early to mid-July they will be gone.
Okay, because Kai wanted to know for the St. Louis area, when will numbers peak? So you said right about now they're peaking and they'll be gone by July.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do they know when it's time to emerge? Michelle would like to know.
Yeah, right. I think that's one of the most fascinating things about that. And if you want to go to the next slide, you can kind of see some of the stages that they go through in their life cycle. So this all happens underground, of course, and they go through 5 instars. And so during that long stint underground, they sit on the xylem of woody plant materials.
Like trees and shrubs and woody plants.
Yeah.
So the xylem.
If you think of a tree and there's kind of the outer part, which is the phloem, that has kind of a thick, sappy, high calorie liquid, and then the inner part is the xylem, and that's mostly water. And that's actually what they tap into, is that real watery, it's nutrient poor, but it's obviously got enough in it for them to survive. And they have kind of like a molecular clock that is keeping track of the seasons via the change in the flow of xylem in that woody plant material. So as trees go through their annual cycle, deciduous trees of kind of going dormant in the cold weather and then coming back and leafing out in the spring, the cicadas are marking time through the changes in the flow of nutrients and water through that root system.
Okay, so fast. So the littlest ones are the ones that fall to the ground and start to burrow.
That's correct.
And the biggest ones, the 5th, that's not actual size, but those are the ones that burrow out. How deep do they get by that 5th stage?
About 8 inches or so. They stay around, probably 6 to 10 inches, but 8 inches by and large underground.
They don't go any deeper at that point? Huh.
They really don't. Now, the tree roots, of course, go much deeper, and so they can pull nutrients from those tree roots even when it's pretty dry, 8 inches down, because they're feeding on the water that's coming through that root system.
Okay. And speaking of water, I mean, we're finally, I think the state is out of this drought emergency, and we've been getting nice rain. So one of the things we noticed, all of the holes from when they dig out, that is great for like water getting down deeper than it normally would, right? So it's like aerating. They're aerating the world for us.
They absolutely are. They are aerating the soil for us, so we can thank them for that job well done.
All right. Hey, Chris wants to know. We talked about this. Are cicadas native?
They are, yes.
And only to the eastern part of North America. So that's cool. You were talking. We'll get into this. Let's see. Does the same species of cicada have different songs? Like when they first emerge in, or time of day, or by temperature? Do their songs change by environmental factors? Gail would like to know.
Yeah, the different species do have different songs. Some of those, it kind of depends on where you're at, but you might even be able to identify by ear if you
But each species has its own song.
Mm-hmm.
But each different species have different songs, which helps them find mates, but each species has one basic song.
They do. And in the areas where different species overlap, sometimes they will change their song slightly so that they don't waste valuable resources attracting the wrong species. And that's just kind of interesting, because it'll be just a very slight change in tone that species will make when it overlaps with another species.
Okay, fascinating. And we're looking at the pictures of the 5 stages of the nymphs underground. Steve wants to know, are they active while underground? Do they do anything except kind of just feed on the tree root?
They feed on the tree roots, and that's about it. And then grow. Of course, they're very slowly growing, but they're not dormant. They are living their lives.
But they're not moving around.
Pretty cool. Yeah, they're not just sleeping under there.
Okay, they'll latch on and like they'll latch on and stay on that same tree root in that same location for their time underground for the most
Yeah,
part?
they might burrow. I don't think we really know
Right.
how much movement they're doing underground during that time.
Okay. And we imagine they're also, what eats them at this point? Moles and
Sure.
underground stuff?
Yes, definitely. Moles will definitely eat them. Anything that is searching for insects underground like that. And in fact, that's a good point because we estimate only about 2% of those little guys that are hatched in eggs on twigs will survive to adulthood. So think about the sheer
Right.
numbers we have now, right?
So folks who are just inundated with these, this is 2% of the potential total number. So could you imagine another 98%? That would just be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of like 2% survival, how many times do females lay their eggs during this time when they're out? I know we'll
No,
get into that a little bit more, but
we will. Typically just once. But
okay.
they can lay up to 600 eggs.
Okay, so
yeah.
and is there a kind of a benefit for all the males congregating in mass? Is there an advantage to that?
Right. We kind of suspect or hypothesize that's a predator avoidance strategy. So to
Makes
come
sense.
out in such large numbers as a species is beneficial to the species itself in survival because it's like, just the sheer number, it would be impossible to consume them all, even though they're pretty dopey flyers. They don't have much for natural predator avoidance behavior, and likely because their main predator avoidance strategy is just sheer numbers.
Right, okay.
There's some interesting theories about why they come out in specifically 13 and 17-year cycles, and in those being prime numbers. And of course, these are just hypotheses based on, what is the benefit evolutionarily that those prime numbers would not be divisible and therefore match up to the multi-year cycles of any other predator species. Say there's a large predator species that, has young every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Well, they're not going to be able to synchronize their population dynamics with something that is 13 or 17 year. It's just an interesting hypothesis and just fascinating, I think.
Right.
We don't fully understand it.
Right. So it's like they evolved to emerge so infrequently that their predators can't match them. So when they, in such great numbers, so that's kind of why the great numbers. Let's get back to the underground scene here because tell us more about that. It's really cool.
It is very cool. So like we talked about, they do need woody vegetation. They do not feed on the root systems of non-woody plants. They have to feed on deciduous forest root systems.
Right. And
so that's why you only find them in those forested areas. So like we said, they have the sucking mouth parts. They cannot bite you with those mouth parts. They simply are not designed to bite at all, but they can stick those mouth parts like a straw into those root systems and suck out that watery xylem mixture.
Right. Okay. While we're on that, Robert wants to know, can cicadas bite me? You've answered that. So here's the question. Can they bite? Can they sting? Can they pinch? Can they harm you in any way?
They cannot harm you in any way at all. They cannot do any of those things, and I'm so glad he asked because I know they're big and they're so dopey. They fly right into your face.
And they land on you or get in your hair, and
Yes, the worst thing they can do is startle you.
Right, so they can't bite, they have no stinger, their legs, I mean, when they land on you, but there's no pinchers. Right, so what about dogs? I mean, I know that stuff, and we're going to get into the kind of wildlife that eats them, but is it okay? Because I know folks, their dogs just gorge on them, and some people's cats and things.
Yep, they will. It depends on your pet. Now, there's nothing toxic about them.
Okay.
So your dog could go out and I have a dog at home that is doing this. So I'm well versed in this. And he just feasts on them. And, there's nothing poisonous at all that he's ingesting, but he is getting a little bit of an irritated stomach just from the sheer amount of fibrous material that is entering a system that he's not used to.
Right.
So, I'm having to keep a little bit of a closer eye on him and, be like, come on inside.
Yeah, because
You
well, they
silly
can't digest the exoskeleton and all of that. So if your dog is gorging, you may notice differences in their bowel habits, or they may be vomiting. And
Yeah.
that's just to purge it, because as you said, they can't really digest the exoskeleton. So they're not poisonous or venomous or any way harmful to pets eating them, just if they gorge.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
okay.
Someone the other day called cicadas sky raisins for dogs.
Right?
And I had to laugh because, I was like, oh my goodness, that definitely describes my own dog's behavior.
Yeah, they are.
Open up the sky raisins.
Yep. So part of this journey of them, we like this, it's on a highway to shell. So this shows them emerging and one coming out. And okay, this is interesting. When they first emerge from that shell, they're white. And
Yeah.
then they darken up, so it takes them a while. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so as you see, when they're white, they're not hardened yet, so they're pretty soft-bodied.
Wow.
Talk to anyone who is interested in eating them. This is supposed to be when you're the prime time to harvest for eating, because they haven't hardened up yet. Not that you couldn't eat, the crunchier ones, but these are when they're softer bodied. And coming out of that last shell, if you've had the opportunity to watch that happen, it happens in slow motion. That shell or that exoskeleton kind of splits down the middle, and then it's sort of a complex process of them releasing their body from that shell. And then when they're doing that, they really aren't capable of like regular movements. So they're pretty still. They're really easy to pick up and catch. A lot of them will be preyed upon by birds and other wildlife during this time as well. And then they harden. And so when they harden, that's when they turn darker, and they get kind of their orange color to them as well. And then their wings have to expand.
Right, and dry out.
Too.
Kind of like a butterfly or a moth when it emerges. It takes a while. I had one propped up right outside my front door, and I watched it like for an entire morning, split, and then it was until afternoon till it took off. This is also, like you said, a good point if somebody's going to eat them. They are edible for people, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I know this is that time when different restaurants and things, and I mean, we've made cicada pizza before, so it's bizarre, but if you want, you can eat them, get them when they're ghostly white, so they're tender, because after that, they get kind of crunchy, almost like a crawdad.
That's right.
Like you're popping a crawdad in your mouth, and with the cicadas too, it's the legs that are just,
Yep.
Okay.
I've been told that you can substitute cicadas for shrimp in any recipe. So if you want to give that a shot, you can.
Wow.
You can try that.
Do we know? I mean, it's again a mystery in so many ways, but is there any nutritional value to us?
Oh, absolutely. They've got they've got protein and whatnot in them. So they're just like wildlife benefit from gorging on them and do very well physically during the time of emergence, which we'll talk about. Humans also can certainly glean nutrition from cicadas.
Right. And hey, I mean, if we're breaking it down, they're mostly protein. So you're on one of those low carb diets, this could be a good snack for you.
Protein and fiber. I think that's like keto or something.
Wow. Right. So, and as the next slide, we see molting ain't easy.
Yeah,
so there's
a drying out time that we saw in that previous slide. They have to expand their wings and correctly, and oftentimes if there's not enough space, and they don't have enough space just because of their sheer numbers to expand their wings, or just various other environmental factors, those wings will dry out and not be functional.
Oh wow.
They're not great flyers anyway, so cicadas with deformed wings can still mate and whatnot. They just obviously can't fly.
Right.
But I see a lot of them that look like this.
And you think in such massive numbers, there's going to be a certain percentage or number of them that are just deformed or kind of odd. So
it's just really common, especially wing deformations in cicadas.
In something like that. And we talked, they need to survive on eastern deciduous trees. What do exotic or invasive trees, what role do they play? Linda wants to know calorie pear trees, just a scourge. But
Sure.
are those beneficial to cicadas? Can they survive on that?
That's an excellent question. I think they actually can feed on those, but to be honest, I'm not sure we really know
Right.
whether they are whether they are feeding on something like calorie pears. So that's an excellent question, and yeah, I'm not sure we know exactly.
Okay, Mary just wants to ask, and we've confirmed this, the cicadas we're seeing now, they are the babies of the 2011 brood.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
They
so
are
yes, Mary, those are
Yep.
those babies. Karen wants to know, so do they excrete a fluid when they land on surfaces, or
Yeah.
do they have an odor, an unusual odor?
Well, I haven't noticed it, but I suspect they probably do. I mean, a lot of insects, just their secretions does have an odor, and it kind of depends on what they've been feeding on, what that odor might be. They do secrete. Now, we talked about how they suck the fluid from xylem, and they will continue to do that as adults periodically on vegetation above the ground. And so that is very water filled, and so that fluid kind of goes right through them. So for lack of a better way to explain it, they do pee a lot. I have noticed my vehicle parked outside has a lot more honeydew on it right now than
Okay.
a typical spring. And a lot of that, we call it honeydew, but caterpillars and other larval insects that
Do that.
that are consuming vegetation like that. But it's a lot more volume this year because of the
Right. Right. And we get this question a lot too, and we know the answer. Do they pee on you?
They do. Yeah, they absolutely.
Okay. But what are
Barely anything though. I mean, you're
but
talking
it's
about a minuscule drop,
right,
but
a drop, but it's not like we need to have an umbrella or a rain hat or anything like
no.
that
I
outside.
don't
So
think it's something you would notice.
and you're
But
not
you do notice it on the windshield of my vehicle.
right, but
Yeah.
you're not going to notice it. Okay.
No.
So we have that. Now, somebody wanted to know how they make that noise. So I think our next slide, the screaming boys of summer, why don't you explain that?
Yeah, so their quote unquote singing is used, the males have this structure on their bodies called the timbal. And it's kind of it's like a membrane that is beneath the folded wings. And so they oscillate that or kind of shake that and vibrate it. And then an interesting component to that is that their abdomens are essentially air-filled resonating chambers.
Whoa.
So they
Who
can
would have thought?
amplify their own sound.
So they have
And
their own
that
echo chamber.
really, yeah, that contributes to that volume. It's impressive. I've been doing some decibel readings around St. Louis just for fun, and especially earlier in the week, we had some really hot sunny days, and some family members were doing decibel readings too, and we were getting between 88 to about 95 decibels in St. Louis County. I heard from a friend out in St. Charles County that had a decibel reading as high as 116.
Wow, and what's that comparable to?
That's really comparable to standing right next to a train. Or a subway or something, a chainsaw.
Okay, like well, this is interesting too, because the sound of a gas mower, a lawnmower,
Yes.
or a chainsaw. And again, earlier we had a question from Jill, who she was saying she was cutting her lawn this week with a power gas mower, and the cicadas just inundated her and covered the mower. So is that a similar decibel reading to the kind of volume that they're making, and could that be confusing then to them?
It absolutely is. That's really interesting because I have heard that exact story from quite a few people that when they mow their lawn, they just say it's like a massacre.
Right. So, right.
And so they would, the cicadas would recognize that as a potential big chorusing, the vibration and the volume of it,
Okay.
and then fly towards it.
So they're not attacking you. They can't hurt you. They're not dangerous. The lawnmower just sounds like a whole bunch of them, and that's what they're attracted to. Okay.
You're just single-minded at this time, and they're going towards the mating call. Yeah.
Right. So speaking of mating, so they mate one time during the summer. So tell us again part of that process.
Yeah. So most of them will mate once. We suspect maybe a quarter of those males especially can mate multiple times. Females probably can mate multiple times, but it seems that most of them just mate one time. So then after mating, 3 to 5 days later, that's when the female will lay the eggs, and we'll get into that.
We're coming up here, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit later. Usually after mating, that female will kind of lose interest in the males, but the males will still continue to chorus after mating.
Okay, until literally they kind of die of exhaustion. They've depleted all of their like bodily energy, and then they fall and kind of become food for everything else.
That's exactly right. I mean, most of them will get consumed, or if they don't, then they will add quite a bit of nutrients back to the soil.
All right, and we even have a little poem.
I found that, and somebody had written it and published it in the Washington Post, and I just thought that was funny. A cicada love story. Life is short, no time to waste. Sleep for years, then date in haste. Flex those muscles, shed that jacket, find a mate, cause a racket.
There we go. So that's pretty much what happens. So some more questions. Now, once they mate, then we get into the extravaganza. So this kind of shows what the females do. And you said they can lay up to about 600 of these little kind of clusters of eggs?
Yeah, they do lay them in clusters too, just like you said, usually just a few dozen in each cluster. And like we talked about before, they prefer to lay those in kind of young twigs, maybe pencil width or so.
It's like
So
pinky size, pinky finger size, okay.
They cut that little, it's almost like a V-shaped slit in the bark and lay those clusters of eggs, typically 200 to 400, but it can be as high as 600 or more. But they don't put all those eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Right.
They do it in multiple.
Right. Survival strategy.
Yeah, so they might make 10 to 40, cuts in a twig to lay those eggs.
Okay, so if you have young trees, they may damage those, so you may want to, again, cover those with a netting or something, but for the most part, they're not going to damage mature trees, people, plants, things like that.
You will start to see some what we call flagging on trees as they lay the eggs and they have cut off the flow of nutrients to the end of that twig, and those leaves will turn brown as they're no longer getting water and nutrients. And we call that flagging. That will not really harm a mature tree, so really nothing to worry about. It's kind of interesting, to watch, but yeah. Yeah,
and other animals in nature cause tree flagging. So again, the cicadas and the trees kind of grew up over millions of years with each other, so they're adapted to this process.
That's exactly right.
Right? Yeah. And then as we look at the next slide, so the eggs are laid and then they hatch, these tiny little things. When are they going to hatch, and what happens then?
So they take about 6 weeks to develop, possibly as long as 8, but more likely closer to 6. But of course, the eggs are being laid over a number of weeks, right now through kind of the end of June. So 6 to 8 weeks from now and the end of June, those will hatch and those nymphs will fall to the ground. And that's when they burrow under, and then they do not see the light of day for 13 more years.
That is just fascinating. So once they do that, they go underground. But again, while they're on the surface, there are so many. And here's some questions. I think we could answer them all here. Have we noticed increase in turkey numbers after cicadas? Do adults eat this, animals themselves? Do they eat once they're above ground? Do bears eat them? What else eats them? Do they attract copperheads to your yard?
Okay, yeah, those are all great questions. There's so many wildlife that are going to feast on cicadas, are already feasting on cicadas this year. So certainly birds, migratory birds, absolutely, and nesting birds, amphibians, reptiles. You see here in some of those examples right here in the slide. Turkey, 100%, they will eat cicadas, and we do see an impact to other wildlife populations in the years following a major cicada emergence like this. So we will see improved survival of young and just improved individual physical fitness of animals that have fed very well throughout a growing season.
Right, and just to touch base, let's take wild turkey and even bob white and some, ground nesting birds like that. The adults benefit from them, but even more important, the poults, the young.
Yeah.
This is that crucial form of just about pure protein that growing chicks need during this developmental phase. So this is just such a bonus to them.
And while cicadas are out, we actually see an increased survival of other larval insects because it's like it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and so some things that are typically preyed on at higher numbers simply aren't because there's such an abundance of cicadas to eat.
Kind of native caterpillars and other insects, yeah, they kind of get a break. When we talk about stuff that eats them, one thing I'll mention, because we've had people saying, oh, they're bringing copperhead snakes into my yard and things like that. Well, if you think about it, copperheads, they're kind of attracted to a heat sense. So they are going after things that emit kind of a heat signature. And cicadas, they have exoskeletons. They're cold-blooded though, aren't they?
They're exotherms.
Yes.
So something like a copperhead is not going to be drawn to your yard because of cicadas. I mean, cicadas are going to be abundant throughout
everywhere
the ecosystem, and they're going to prey on them opportunistically. Just because you're seeing them in your yard, that doesn't mean they're not also in the common ground, right?
Right. The cicadas didn't bring them there.
Yeah, that's not bringing them into your yard. No, it's just that they're opportunistically feeding on them because they're everywhere.
Right, and even squirrels. We think nuts, but wow, what a bonus for animals like squirrels.
Yep. And then there's so many, of course, that as they decay, because a lot of them won't be eaten, they do add nutrients to the soil. So that's sort of another benefit as well.
Right, and again, folks, we are getting so many great questions from you. Thank you. Keep them coming. Use the chat box on the right side of your screen. Erin, too, if we think about this is that full circle where they are relying on these deciduous trees for their nutrients. They go through their whole life cycle. They stay pretty close to where they emerge. They don't travel very far, do they?
No, they do not.
So at the end stage, they are then giving back an incredible amount of nutrients to those very trees.
Yeah, I really like the way you just put that, actually. Yep. That's a nice way to think about it.
It really is this wonderful life cycle. And we talked about cicadas in your pets already. So chickens, suburban chickens, folks raising chickens. This is a feast for them too, right?
Yep. High protein, easy to catch.
Right. So
readily available. It's kind of like you can spend a little less money on mealworms maybe this month if you've got chickens.
Okay, so just Sandy, to let Sandy know, squirrels eat them, raccoons eat them. Gail, we could tell you bears eat them. Just about everything that eats stuff like this will eat them. So that is great. And their main role in the ecosystem, Terry wants to know, is it basically as a food source for other critters? And isn't that all of our main roles?
That's definitely one of their main impacts on the ecosystem is just the pulse of food available to other wildlife, and then the shift in population that we see in the years following a cicada emergence. But also, I would say, like you said, Joe, just a few minutes ago, it really does add something back to the soil, and it's kind of a beautiful statement of the life cycle.
It's the circle of life. I mean, really, what a great example one animal can give for that full life cycle. And so, Beth, I want to thank you for your question. You heard of a fungus that is infecting some cicadas, and Erin, we're just about to talk about that. So let's talk about the tale of the living dead.
Yeah, so this is a fungus that has evolved alongside periodical cicadas. So it also is kind of living out a 13-year life cycle, so to speak, and this is the main time that it spreads itself. So this is what it looks like, and I am starting to see quite a few cicadas with these kind of white rear ends, so to speak, and that is the fungus. that white
Oh.
rear end. And so as they begin to mate, that is how that disease transmission, or that that host transmission occurs. So the interesting thing about this fungus is that it also causes some behavioral changes in cicadas. So it causes males to continue to send out mating calls kind of without, later in the day, earlier in the morning, and even when females are not present, they will start to mimic females, actually, to attract other males with wing flicking and whatnot. And that is all kind of caused by this fungus and some sort of complex neurological relationship internal in the cicada, and the fungus then spreads itself as those cicadas are kind of compelled to continue to mate, even though oftentimes the bottom part of their abdomen or their entire abdomen will fall off.
Right, that one picture looks so gross. It's like half a bug.
Yes, but it will continue to attempt to mate with other cicadas as that fungus kind of compels it to do so.
And so instead of successfully mating, it's just really transferring the spores of this fungus to the other animals. So this is like their worst STD.
It is. It absolutely is. And we don't really know what the infection rate is. Maybe as low as 5%.
Right.
Some areas, we suspect it might even be up to 30%. We don't really understand why it's high in some areas or low in other areas. That is some stuff that is being actively researched right now as they are out and about, and that we're trying to better understand.
Okay, and here's, I think, another probable answer to their sheer volume. So they come out in such massive numbers so infrequently that everything can't possibly eat them, and this fungus can't possibly get all of them. So this is another kind of nature's answer to surviving these threats.
Yep, I suspect that is true, yep.
Right, and I mean, these things are fascinating. And again, what a perfect opportunity to inspire kids to become fascinated and to get outside, discover nature through cicadas like this. Who's this adorable child here?
Isn't she a cutie? That happens to be one of mine, and I just took this picture the other day. I have a second grader who is head over heels for cicadas and having the time of her life. And I think a lot of kids develop sort of a fear or aversion to bugs, insects, or, even just creepy crawly things at a young age. And this is a very kind of accessible, they're easy to catch, there's nothing dangerous about them. And so it's a really neat way to really engage children with this incredibly important life form of insects in a way that they're not going to get hurt at all. So we've been having a lot of fun catching them, and she likes to name them, and it's just been wonderful to kind of see this emergence through her eyes.
Right, and again, folks, we have time for more questions, so if you have any, please shoot them to us through the chat box on the right side of your screen. I mean, we're talking about cicadas, and this is such a great opportunity for kids of all ages, even adults, to get outside. And I mean, you can collect them, they don't bite, they don't sting, they don't pierce. So you can hold them in your hands, you can look at them up close. You said they're kind of dopey flyers, so they're not going to be real evasive. So
yeah, they're so easy to catch, which is one of the fun things about them, is you can just walk up and pick them right up, or catch them out of the air. That's kind of a fun challenge for kids as well, and adults, kids of all ages. But I just like to remind folks that this is such a short time, all things relative. This is such a short time that they're out, and in anyone's lifetime, you only are going to have a handful of experiences in your life like this, that you will be in the midst of a major periodical cicada emergence. Right. And how cool is that?
How cool is that? And especially, folks, if you move outside of the Eastern United States, then you can't see them. So now is the chance for what, the next month or so?
Mm-hmm. Yep, the next month or so. In fact, you mentioned that, and it was just reminding me. It was a couple weeks ago. I spoke to a family that had just moved here to St. Louis from Thailand, and I was like, oh boy,
You're in for a treat.
It's something really interesting, but it won't happen every year.
Right. So
But
enjoy it.
they were glad to be warned that it was coming. So
just to reiterate, so we see them out, they're mostly on tree, all of that. So if we find them on our flowers and things, they're just hanging out there. They're not hurting them or eating them.
Yeah, so you do not have to worry about things like, what about my tomato plants or my flowers or anything? They do not eat herbaceous or non-woody plants.
Okay.
They don't eat leaf tissue. So they really are completely reliant on woody plant material. So, certainly there's no use for pesticides or anything to try to that would do much more harm than good.
Thank you, Erin. That really brings up a really important point. So folks might get freaked out and go out and wanted to buy, do they still make like Yard Guard or some big insecticide? It's the worst thing you can do for your yard because it kills all the beneficial insects.
Yeah, it'll disrupt all the natural processes in place, honestly.
Right.
We never recommend that.
Right. So some questions. Back to the fungus. The fungus, does that fungus infect any other creatures that we know of, or can that harm anything that eats or touches the cicadas?
Yeah, no, it does not infect anything other than cicadas. It is very specific to cicadas. Now, can it make you sick if you eat it? I don't know. I would personally, if you're going to eat cicadas, or I'd personally avoid eating fungus-infected ones.
Yeah, good idea.
I know there's plenty of wildlife consuming them, and they always, the fungus isn't new. It's been around for ages, and so obviously wildlife do fine with it. So I don't suspect there's any real harm, but I'd avoid eating the fungus ones.
Right, Erin. And speaking of eating, we were talking about all the critters that eat them, including people. I don't, but do you by chance have any favorite recipe or idea or anything for cicadas?
Yeah, well, chocolate dip is a favorite way to eat them.
That's a favorite for anything.
You would chocolate dip a strawberry or something.
Okay.
I get a kick out of something. This is something I'll do is make stuffed mushrooms, and then you stick a cicada into the mushroom cap, but you only put it in like half of them, and then you stuff the mushrooms, and then for many of us that are just not really, we're kind of lukewarm about the idea of eating a cicada. Well, here's your chance. You got a 50-50 chance. Roll the dice, and maybe you'll get a cicada stuffed mushroom.
Okay.
Maybe you'll just get a plain one. It's kind of a fun little game you can play.
Right, and it's not just by itself, so yeah, it's easy to.
Cicada roulette, yeah.
All right. Here's a little bit of a complex question. Somebody's asking why they bother molting once they emerge, so they don't look that different, and they only live for a very short time. So it seems like a really complex process that takes a lot of energy just for that brief period of time.
Sure. So that last molt allows them to spread their wings out and hopefully then have the capability of flight, which will greatly improve their chances at being successful reproducing.
Okay.
So that last molt is likely due to reproductive success.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good to know. And those beady red eyes. So do we know how their eyesight is? Is it good eyesight?
Yeah, I don't know. That is a great question, and I don't know the answer to that one, but yeah, great question. Let's find out.
Right. Okay. And we have time, needless to say. We'll get back to you in another decade plus. Somebody was asking if this will be recorded. Yes, folks, all of our Wild Webcasts, we record them and then post them to our website at mdc.mo.gov. Just give us a few days and then go on and search Wild Webcast, and all of our webcasts will come up. So I want you to know that. Hey, Erin, somebody wants to know, can you tell the difference between males and females?
Yeah, you actually can. It takes a little while to you need to look at a bunch of them, I think, at least personally, to start getting a hang of it. But the females will have a more pointed abdomen, like at the rear end of their abdomen, because they have an ovipositor there. That's where they lay their eggs and kind of cut the slit in the twigs to do so. Whereas the males have like a blunter, and sometimes even a little bit wider abdomen. There's some great photos online. University of Connecticut has one of the best periodical cicada information sites I've seen around. And there's some really great identification tools there for males and females and different species. So I encourage you to check that out.
Okay, and folks too, we've been doing a lot on cicadas. You've probably seen a lot of news out there. And Erin, we're covering some unique stuff, so thank you all the more. I want to remind folks too to also check out our Nature Boost podcast. The April episode is called Here Come the Cicadas, and it features our own host, Jill Pritchard, along with our MDC forest entomologist, Robbie Deerhoff. And they cover all kind of good stuff that we covered, some stuff we didn't, and it's just another format and more information. So check out our Nature Boost podcast. You can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or you can go to mdc.mo.gov and search Nature Boost and watch it through there. I listened to it. It was so enjoyable and kind of funny. It was just humorous, enjoyable, and interesting. So here we are. We're kind of wrapping up, Erin. Can you go back?
Yep.
So again, last part of this, we have to enjoy them while they last.
That's right. We don't have too long to enjoy this, or as some people might say, to put up with it. I'm getting that question a lot about how much longer is this going to go on,
right?
You know, but not long. It's just not going to be long, and then we won't see them again until 2037, and who knows what'll happen in that time.
Right. And how old will each of us be, folks? We can answer that on our own.
I know. I like to ask that to kids too, you know.
Right.
How old are you going to be the next time when you see the babies that are coming from these cicadas? And so, you know, you ask that to a second grader who's like, oh my goodness, you know, they haven't really
it's amazing
got it that way.
It's amazing. And we are, folks, so you know, we are sitting in a conference room at Commission headquarters in Jefferson City. We have double-paned glass windows, insulated double-paned glass windows that are fully closed with blinds. And we could still, I don't know if you could hear them, but we could still clearly hear the cicadas right outside. So
pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Well, folks, again, check out our Nature Boost podcast for more. You could find this and other webcasts on our website at mdc.mo.gov. You could get more information from our online field guide at mdc.mo.gov, all of that good stuff. Look for, you know, all kind of information out there. Erin Shank, urban wildlife biologist with the Department of Conservation. Thanks for sharing all your expertise.
Thank you, Joe. This was such a treat for me. I would talk about cicadas till I was blue in the face.
I know. It's so freaky and fascinating, and one of the coolest things about kind of the oddities of the animal kingdom. You know, what a unique thing. And for our 150 plus folks, thank you for joining our Wild Webcast on the Cicada Apocalypse, a Brood Awakening. We've talked about the fascinating life of periodical cicadas with Erin Shank, our guest expert. So thanks, Erin, again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This kind of wraps it up. We encourage you to literally get outside and discover nature through cicadas. What a fascinating opportunity. Have a great day, and we'll catch you for the next one.